Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Audit Committee meeting of Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. And I'd like to have the secretary do a roll call.
Good morning, everyone. Starting with our private members, Michael Spitzer, Chair. Larry Nangelo. Mark Kaplan. We have Marcia Van Wagner via Zoom.
Present.
Thank you. Our public members, representing Mayor Eric Adams, Paul Timas.
Present.
Representing Comptroller Brad Lander, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
Representing Public Advocate Jumani Williams, Wesley Paisley.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Can I just say something before things started, just from a remote perspective? I don't hear anything unless people have their fingers on the microphone. It is dead silent. So if you're talking without the microphone on, the people, at least I, and possibly the other people who are remote, can't hear anything in the room.
Okay, thank you. Just heads up, there's a button that says push. In order to talk or for people to hear you, got to hit that button.
And you have to keep it down, too.
And you got to keep your finger on it.
Yeah.
Not just. Before we actually begin the meeting, we have some administrative tasks that we have to do for the audit committee itself. And at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to the secretary, Katrina.
We're going to start with the nominations for chair. Do we have a nomination?
I nominate Mike.
I second.
Okay, so we have Michael Spitzer as our chair.
Thank you. I don't know why, but thank you. At this time, I'd like to have a nomination for secretary, and I'll nominate Katrina Stauffer.
I'll second.
She really doesn't want this. As Larian said, you can't escape. Okay, thank you, everyone. And the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the committee bylaws in accordance with Article 4, Section 3. So I'll make a motion to adopt those bylaws.
I'll second.
I know Mark, looking at Mark's papers, he has some comments and nits, so he'll just pass them over to Katrina. The next item on the agenda is the motion to accept the minutes. Wait, before we do that, just staying with the audit committee, motion to accept the annual report of which ends the audit committee year ends tomorrow, February 29th, 2024. So I'll make that motion to accept the annual report.
Second. Second.
If anybody has any nits, please pass them on to Katrina. At this time, I'd like to have a motion to accept the minutes of the audit committee meeting held January 23rd, 2024.
I'd like to make some comments on it. I could do that later. Nothing substantive.
Okay. Mark will pass over the comments on, to Katrina. With that, all of that completes our administrative tasks that we had to take. And at this time, I'd like to, excuse me, have somebody introduce all the people here or anybody that might be on Zoom from the New York City School Bus Umbrella Services. I guess it's Nick Bus. Nice Bus.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angelo Mayo. I'm the budget director at NiceBus. I'm here with Surjit Sira. She's with BTQ, our financial services, providing financial services for NiceBus, as well as Matt Berlin, the CEO of NiceBus, is in Zoom.
And I'm
And
very
I am,
sorry.
oh,
I just,
go ahead, Matt.
Matt Bernino, I wanted to introduce myself and say, I'm sorry. I came down with a cold and it just seemed safer for everybody, for me not to be there in person. Sorry.
All right, duly appreciated.
Thanks, Matt. I think we all appreciate that, but we'd love to see you here. It's okay. My name is Phil Marciano. I am a shareholder with Meyer Hoffman McCann CPAs. If you don't know already, Warren Rupel was the former engagement partner on most of the accounts that we'll talk about today. I have taken over for him effective 1/1/24, and he's enjoying retirement, from what I understand.
Do you have any opening remarks, or could you explain briefly Nice Bus?
Sure. I mean, Angelo, do you want me to do that or do you want to?
Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I'm happy if you want to. I didn't mean to. And I'm sorry, we just arranged this last night, everybody. So Angelo and I didn't divide up the tasks. But Angelo, did you have some or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Sure. So Nice Bus is a school bus company. So we were created we're getting up on our 3rd year anniversary, created 3 years ago as a nonprofit corporation. Our board is appointed by 4 of the members by the chancellor and 1 by the head of OMB. And we provide school bus service. We bought and closed on, and I'm going to miss the date, October 30th or November 1st of 2021, the assets of MV Transportation. They were operating as Reliant, a school bus company in New York City. It was about 900 buses, and we also received a contract from the city to provide school busing for 5 years. And we've been doing that since then. So we've been in operations for a little over 2.5 years. The school busing in New York City is expensive. The city spends about $1.5 billion on it. And there are a lot of people who suggest that the service isn't terrific. So our purpose is to really threefold. One of them is to provide transparency, so the city can have a better understanding of what it's paying for. The second is to provide great bus service, and the third is to innovate in school busing. I was hired, as I said, about 3 years ago. Angelo, I think, was our second or our third employee. I used to run school busing under Mayor Bloomberg, so I'm aware of the operation and the challenges. And in fact, I'd sort of lobbied the de Blasio people around creating a sort of a good guy vendor in school busing, because I think one of the challenges was the city had some trouble relating to some of the private vendors. And I'll say, though, not really reflected in the financial reports, and maybe not as apparent in our results ending last June, we've been enormously successful, I think. Our measures of performance are up and are above those of other bus companies. It's hard to see the costs of other bus companies, but it looks like our costs are lower. And we've been innovating in a lot of ways, in particular around electrification. So we have 3 large grants for electrification. One of them, $8 million from the state to create a model electric school bus depot at our Zarega facility. The second one, an EPA grant for 25 electric buses that should be arriving this spring. And then just announced about, I guess, a month ago, another 100 buses from the EPA. So we're enormously proud of what we're doing. And that's it for the introduction.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding the financial statements before we get to the management letter?
I do, Mike, if I can. There is a reference on page 4 to other income relating to the assumption of potential future pension liabilities. What are those?
As part of the acquisition of the buses in 2022, it is the difference between essentially the consideration that was paid to Reliant and the value of the buses that they obtained from Reliant. And part of that contract, which you'll also see in the financials, is that they would support any future pension liabilities if they occur in the future. So it's a bit of a contingent item, because Reliant was part of the pension fund. I think it's 1181. That is the pension fund that you're part of. That pension fund is now, all the payments are being made by Nice Bus. As part of that agreement, under some ERISA technicalities, ERISA requires some bonding to be had, which was done during 23, a portion of that for the next 5 years. And if NICEBUS were to default on making payments to the pension fund and thereby withdraw from the pension fund, it would then cause a liability secondarily on Reliant. So that number is as big summary, is a contingent liability for anything that may happen in the future related to the pension plan.
And so that'll be around for a long time.
At least 5 years, yeah.
Okay.
Mark's looking. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. So earlier,
Go, Wes.
what was the acronym that you said? Was it EPA that you said?
Sorry, I can never find the unmute
You
button.
are
Yes,
muted.
EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. I can never find the unmute button and then I'm always scrambling.
It's
But
fine.
yes, the E EPA.
Could you speak more about that? Because we're always kind of, I'm just concerned of the financials when any company, transportation expands going forward to make it environmentally safe. Are you guys working on like electrifying your bus fleets? Are you thinking about incentives and also any ADA compliance too? Just curious.
Right. So, so this is part of, the state of New York and the city of New York have mandated that all school buses be electric by 2035 and have prohibited bus companies from buying any internal combustion school buses, any new ones after 2027. So we are getting ready and sort of getting out ahead of a state and city mandate. The EPA, this is a national effort to electrify, in fact, most transportation. The EPA has been out ahead on this, and they've provided grant programs to fund the purchase of electric buses. So it's in accordance with that project. So the funding that we receive and each of the groups, the 25 and then the 100 buses, slightly differ, but they cover the cost, pretty much all of the cost of a bus itself, and about $20,000 per bus for the infrastructure needed to provide the charging station and provide the wires and the power to get to the vehicle. We are purchasing, we're replacing, so what we're doing in the purchase, sorry, there's a lot here. We're replacing like with like buses. So about 10% of our vehicles, the routes that we have are designed by the city. 10% of our vehicles are on routes that have children who can't walk up the steps to the bus. So as we replace a bus with a wheelchair lift, as we buy electric buses, we're replacing like for like with wheelchair lift buses. There are additional costs that we're going to have for electrification. The $20,000 won't cover that, but happily, the city had set aside, and I'm going to miss my numbers. I feel like it was $200 million in the capital budget for the electrification of NICEBUS, and this is taking significant pressure off of that. But there are additional costs.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very much appreciated, because I always like to understand what are the logistics or just the financials for expanding to that area.
So, and we're not expanding, we are replacing our fleet. So this doesn't involve, it's new buses, but we are scrapping old internal combustion buses as we do this. So this doesn't mean that we are expanding the number of routes that we have or expanding the number of buses we have. It just gets us a newer fleet and a cleaner fleet.
So when you replace a bus, does the old bus, is it going to the scrap yard, or is it going to be sold to another bus company so that
it's scrapped?
Turns a profit, maybe potentially, or maybe it's part of depreciation assets. Just curious. I'm just
so as a condition of the two EP. So in general, when we so let's see. So as a condition of the two EPA grants that we have, we must scrap and render useless the vehicle. So in fact, there are pretty strict requirements about, drilling a hole through the engine and doing other things so that it doesn't, so the polluting asset is no longer able to pollute. There is some scrap value that we can get for the vehicle just from the metal, but they're not going back into use. We do when we, the fleet that we bought was relatively old. When we have bought some new buses, we have sold the older vehicles if we could, though frankly, the vehicles are, especially the ones that we're replacing, are so old, there really isn't much value except for the true scrap value. In other words, the value of just the kind of the metal. And then we obviously, you know, I mean, most of those buses are, well, they're not fully depreciated because we bought the assets, but obviously we, you know, we are careful to take care of proper accounting for the assets if there was still some value on our balance sheet.
And just a random question, are these new buses also going to have AC units on them?
Yes, so they're fully compliant with the city's requirement, which is front and rear air conditioning and front and rear heating. And they're
Thank you very
exciting.
much.
They have exterior cameras. You know, it's really great to have new buses. They are clean and quiet. And I'd be happy to, I can't tell who's speaking, but happy to, there's a lot of exciting things going on in electric school busing. And I'd be happy to, I mean, we can talk more about it now, but also happy to, you know, show you around. We have one bus now that's running. We're expecting delivery of some more in the next few weeks, but happy to, you know, show you what we're up to.
I
Thank
have
you.
some modest questions. There's a line here for capital reimbursements. What does that mean? Page 8.
That's in year 22. Those are the amounts that were paid from New York City DOE in relation to the purchase of the buses. That was the reimbursement amount for capital assets, essentially.
Push it down.
Salaries, I did, it's green. Go away, go away. The salaries and employee benefits has a major jump year on year. What happened?
The main difference is that last year in FY22, we were operating for part of the year. This year is our first full year of operations.
Okay, that's helpful. And then, this is, as a professional, I saw the professional fees of $12 million. That's I know you had a restructuring and all that, but that's a big number.
So that was also discussed last year. So many of the transition services payments that were done to Reliant were also counted on the professional services line. Most of those were one-time payments, so all of those are no longer in FY23.
Just looking at a business which paid that much in professional fees, it's a big number. Okay. I have one thing that I always like to tease you auditors on, and that is everything is as such instead of therefore. I never get, you all must go to the same school.
Noted, and that's fine.
As Mark might be looking, jumping to the management letter, I have a number of questions and comments, mainly to the status of things. Like in number 2, it says, but you know, like the investment policy has not been approved by management, or has been approved by management, but not the board. What is the status of that?
Matt, do you want to talk about the board?
Sure. The board has approved the investment the investment policy at the last meeting, which was I feel like it was late November. So really the challenge with the board, as I mentioned, is appointed by, so, you know, 1 appointee by the head of OMB and 4 by the chancellor of the Department of Education. We had some trouble with the transition of the administrations reconstituting the board. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I think rightly Chancellor Banks is, you know, not at the top of his list was appointing a board to Nice Bus, right, with all the other things he had to do. So it just took us a little while to get the board back to meeting. We did comply with obviously our requirement to meet every year, but it took a little time to get them into a formal meeting and approve the investment policy.
A question, because you mentioned the board. Do you have an audit committee?
So the entire board serves as the audit committee right now. It's just a 5-person board.
When you say right now, is there plans to create an audit committee for this entity?
So the board, the board is, so the board, the chancellor was really just focused on reconstituting the board last fall as soon as school was open. It's had one meeting and there's another meeting scheduled in a few weeks. And one of the things it's doing is deciding how it wants to organize itself and whether it wants to have a separate audit committee.
Okay, and just number 3. The orders are saying that, conflicts of interest forms haven't been completed. Have they all been completed at
So
this
they've all been
point?
completed now, yes. Again, some of that issue was just the board members who had left the board it was hard to get some of them. One of the members died, but they have all completed their conflict of interest forms.
And, once again, on number 4, policies and procedures.
So again, we have an approved accounting policies and procedures manual, and it has been approved by management. It's been looked at by our auditors. It simply hasn't been approved by the board. We, Phil and I have had some, and Surjit and Angelo have even had some emails about whether or not that's a requirement of the AICPA or simply a recommendation. But we don't, we have thorough accounting procedures that I have reviewed, that our auditors have reviewed. We've hired a professional team to do our accounting. So I think this is really it's a question of whether or not the board should be looking at our policy for aging receivables and things. Not a question of whether or not we do have written accounting procedures.
So hearing you have procedures, the question is, does the board have to approve them? Or is it just management?
It's certainly a strong recommendation of AICPA. And Phil, you can sort of talk more about this.
It's more of a best practice recommendation.
Right.
I mean, comparably with all the different organizations that I audit and see, the board typically does at least approve the existence of, maybe not the nitty-gritty detail of the policies, but at least the policy is there and that it's been reviewed by management as a bit of an oversight practice. Whether or not there's a law requiring as such, there is not. I know public authorities law has certain things that the NICE bus is required to do. I don't believe the accounting policies manual is one of them. So yeah, as Matt indicated, it's a best practice. If that's not something that NICE bus believes is something they absolutely need to do, then the response in the future can be, as relevant. We don't believe this is necessary, but he's correct. That's
Okay.
the gist of it.
And on number 5, I have 2 questions. First, how much were the expenses of the CEO? And 2, has this been put to bed by setting up the policy for who's going to approve those expenses?
So
Matt,
Go ahead.
So I should have totaled up the reimbursements. They are a few $1,000, which is mostly, wait. So mostly that is, in our charming city, we've had a few buses that were towed and towing companies that require a cash payment. So we don't want to have cash as a company. So I've simply gone into my bank account, taken out, the amounts are always weird, right? $823.84, and handed that over. And then we've recorded that as something that I'm due. There's a little bit of travel and things where I've traveled within the city. A few other, we don't have a postage meter. There's a few things for, what do you call it? Notary, very minor expenses, except for the few, over $500 in towing expenses. I haven't gone to the board yet about those, just because, again, we have this first meeting before Christmas, and it just didn't, they were doing enough of approving the investment policy, kind of getting themselves in order. I can wait before I sort of try to seem greedy and ask for my money. We've accounted for it. It's fine. The Berlin family is okay.
We look at reimbursements to management for obvious reasons, right? Reputational risks that's out there. There was a recent Newsday article from a CFO on Long Island who, embezzled whatever, $5 million, $6 million. I'm not saying Matt did that. No, we didn't see that. But for obvious reasons, the opportunity we want to try and limit, and it's a best practice for the board to approve the top management's payments. So.
No, in the past, there was an organization where it was tens of thousands of dollars in the city. So it's a sensitive issue.
Oh, that's exactly why I haven't pressed it, is I want to just make sure everyone's okay. We've obviously kept receipts and records of everything. We've accounted for everything to the penny.
It's the actual reimbursement to the CEO that hasn't been done, but everything is documented.
Anybody else have any questions? Larry?
Yes. I have one overarching one. The last paragraph of the October 19th says this is limited use. Either you waive it or you get rid of it.
So you're correct. So in the future, I'm going to add on here New York City Audit Committee and other members of New York City management, or however you want that worded, because you're correct. There should be a stipulation there that it's available for use by this committee.
Why not the general public?
So I'm assuming FOIL, I'm not a lawyer, so don't gig me on the legal stuff, but under FOIL, this would be requestable no matter what the paragraph says. So I don't think the paragraph needs to point to the general public. Typically in any government audit that I do, never does the paragraph say and for use by the general public.
Mostly you don't put the paragraph in because every audit committee I'm on, it gets X'd out.
I have to check with my standards group on that one, because I'm pretty sure that you have to have some purpose or restricted use on the letter itself by auditing standards. We can enumerate certain people that are able to use the letter, but I don't think you can take the entire paragraph out.
Just like to know that we can actually have this in front of us.
I give you permission. Although Matt has to give you permission because it's not my letter.
So that
Just to save time, that's in every single one of these.
Yeah.
So. Larry?
Yeah, I have to say I'm somewhat disturbed about. You're right there. I'm somewhat disturbed about the items in the management letter. And the city does this sort of thing that creates works with a creation of this sort to improve services and to have the public feel confident that this is an institution or a creation that's actually making things better and it's being run well and efficiently. And then, you see a management letter like this. And it's unfortunate because, I'm looking at the stuff and it's all ordinary administrative stuff. We all complete conflict of interest forms. I don't know why your board doesn't. I mean, I don't know why, it's sort of a little shocking to me that these things, some of them have existed for 2 years. They've been pointed out and not fixed. And it does not create a good impression for the people in the city that this was what the Board of Education decided to do to make transportation services better and more efficient, and this is what you end up with. Now, I'm not saying anything here is terrible, but the fact that there are 5 of them, the fact that some of them have been around for a year and not been fixed, I'm finding it very, very disturbing. And I actually worked when I was at OMB with, to do something similar in terms of custodial stuff. And it worked. And so I'm just going to say, Caesar's wife should be above suspicion. And it just doesn't look good. It just does not look good. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
I'd like to follow up on that and say, I'd like a written report by March 31st as to what is the current status of every single one of these items. Larry,
No, no, I think that would be helpful. But again, I'm just, so this is a warning because I mean, if this goes out into the public, it's problematic. I mean, it's very problematic, and and so I think a written report on fixing it would help, and it should be done quickly. Thank you.
And please send that report to Katrina Stauffer at the Controller's Office, and she'll distribute it to all the Audit Committee members.
One more comment, and that is that the footnote indicates that, it's page 20, that unrestricted and cash, uninsured, uncollateralized. I'm accustomed to seeing when that gets into the millions, that somebody says that some part of the organization is continuously monitoring the credit of the institution with the uncollateralized cash. And sometimes it's a peanut amount of money, okay. But when you get into the millions, I think you'll find that most people get it collateralized. And why don't you?
So we actually have, since we have two accounts, one of our accounts has been fully collateralized. The other account that is made up of the pension escrow that Phil was talking about, and a line of credit or a letter of credit that we have to have insurance for our buses. For those two, the bank has not, we're still working with the bank to collateralize that portion. So it's the pension escrow that Phil was talking about earlier, and the, what was the other one I mentioned? And letter of credit that hasn't been collateralized.
Well, I'm accustomed to seeing a statement when you have under-collateralized stuff saying that we monitor the credit standing of the people who provide the uncollateralized holdings of our money. So it seems to me the world is entitled to know that you're watching it, and you're not saying that here.
Noted. We can add that in the disclosure next year. They do have policies to monitor, which is how they discovered they were uncollateralized.
Well, and the question is, why not collateralize? But if you're not collateralizing it and you don't put it in the world I live in, that's an invitation to uncover this.
Understand.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Somebody ought to check the spelling of city. It's capital V. I'll give you that.
Are there any other questions, comments regarding the financials or the management letter?
I have a comment, since you did bring up FOIL. So just because people have access to use FOIL doesn't mean it's convenient for the members of our public, because first they have to apply, and then they may or not get the documents. Then they have to appeal, may or may not get the documents. And then eventually comes the unfortunate burden of litigation, which becomes cost to the city and becomes cost to the members of the public. And this is not legal advice, but there are other options where you could say certain parts of the document are made available to the public, or you could freely put an option saying it is. And then for stuff that you feel that is trade secret, then you obviously maybe put a header over it. But just to kind of rely on FOIL to have it available to the public is burdensome.
So also, Nice Bus is a public authority under public authorities law. If you go on the ABO's website, you can pull down the reports.
Yes, but since you did do the aspect of open to the members of the public, open to the committee, it'd just be nice just to add that there.
Noted.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments or questions, I'd like to thank you for coming this morning, and good luck.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is the New York City School Support Services.
So I'm signing off, right? You don't need me anymore?
We're good, Matt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is the New York City School Support Services. Could you please identify yourself for the purpose of the minutes and anybody else that might be on Zoom?
So I'm Brooke Jenkins Lewis. I'm the CFO of NYSIS.
Stephen Brennan, I'm the Executive Director.
JD Cruz, Director of Finance, Division of School Facilities, DOE.
Phil Napolitano, New York City Department of Education, School Facilities.
Do you have any opening remarks or, and briefly, like the organization itself?
So good morning, everyone. NYSIS was
Thing, as you're talking, please remember to hold the push button down so that everybody, even on Zoom, can hear.
Good morning. NYSIS was started in 2016, and it was specifically created to replace the custodian engineers from hiring their employees for the schools. Our sole purpose is to hire, pay, and administer to the facilities group that work in the 1,400 school buildings throughout New York City. And that's the basics of what we do and who we are.
And financially for the organization?
So financially, we're roughly almost $750 million, about 700 and I believe it's 70,000 or 50,000. Let me pull it up. Sorry, yes, million. It's a zero makes a difference. About 740 million. We are comprised and roughly pay approximately anywhere between 7,500 to 8,000 employees biweekly, depending on the seasonality.
And those are all the people that support the custodians to run the building? Well, operationally, and that, the building itself, not the academic part.
Specifically, that's exactly it. They're there to support the custodian. The custodian manages the property under the guidance of the DSF from the DOE. We are just supplying the labor to do the work for the custodian engineers.
Does anybody have any questions, comments?
I was once the chairman of the audit committee of the Board of Ed, and I remember the problems with the school custodians when they were running shooting galleries in the basements. So I think this is obviously a great improvement over what went on. And I think
The custodians themselves, how do they get appointed?
They're required to take civil service test. And if you want further, I'll let Phil.
Are they DOE employees at this junction? Because at one time they would get a 1099 and a W-2.
So the 1099s went away in 2016 with the formulation of NYSIS. And yes, they are New York City Department of Education employees. We have about 800 right now. We hover between 750 and 850, depending on hiring within the city. And of that 800, I would say there's about 30 provisionals that are waiting to be appointed off of the next exam if they pass it.
Do they still get the Jeep?
I was a custodian. I was appointed in 2006, and I've been in the system since 2000, and the Jeeps have been gone for the last 24 years, as far as I know.
Anybody have any questions?
I noticed something that caught my eye. On page 21, you have an allocation of 10% to hedge. I guess hedge funds would be a better word. All right. With a rate of return of 3.21. I've never heard of a hedge fund selling itself with that rate of return. Nor do I see how you probably can make the 7% rate you hope to get with this allocation. I didn't have the opportunity to do the arithmetic, but the even the fixed income at 1.61, you can buy long-term treasuries and yield a lot more than that.
Sure. So a couple of things to note. The 32BJ pension fund is the fund that we're talking about here, and it's only in the financials because NYSIS is the predominant employer under GASB 78 rules. The information here related to target allocations, the discount rates, the actuarial assumptions are all done by an actuary. Milliman is the calculator on that. And the allocation of the asset and the management is done by 32BJ. So this is merely a reporting of that. Also, which is very lagged, the measurement date on these, as is allowed under GASB, is 1 year behind the financial statement date. So you're really looking at June 30, 2022 market information here and the allocation. So some of this, for sure, if you're looking at it in current terms, makes no sense. In terms of anything else, that's really on the 32BJ pension asset managers.
Okay.
Yeah, like this sounds like it's come a long way from when I was involved in the city in preparing the financials as well as the DOE on their financials as to who and what were the custodians and all their staffs. So I applaud you.
Thank you very much. It's a team effort, so thank you.
So if there are no other comments or questions, I'd like to thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, your management letter had nothing.
You might capitalize the D in the city of New York. It happens to be its official name.
Noted. And I agree, management does a great job with this organization, so thank you.
Next up is ECF, the Educational Construction Fund. You have all
All the procurements are done separately, so.
Understood.
Okay, the next up on the agenda is the New York City Educational Construction Fund, ECF. Could you please identify yourself for the purpose of the minutes and anybody else that's here, once again, for the purpose of the minutes?
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Maldonado. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Educational Construction Fund.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Wong, and I am the CFO of the New York City Educational Construction Fund.
Okay, you have any? He's a permanent fixture. Next year we'll have a sign up.
Exactly. So just as a way as background, the Educational Construction Fund is a New York State public authority mandated to build New York City public schools through mixed-use development projects. And currently we have approximately 18 properties throughout the 5 boroughs.
How many schools are there now?
There's 18 schools with joining mixed-use properties. And there is one in the pipeline that will be open in September of this year that will include 2 schools as well.
And one of the 18 was sold?
So two of them were sold earlier in the 90s or 2000s, Norman Thomas and Murray Bertram. And in my notes, I do discuss that those now have been conveyed, the school portions have been conveyed per statute to the Department of Education. Our statute requires that after 40 years or after the bonds are repaid, that the school portion themselves be moved over to the Department of Education, which has always controlled maintenance and upkeep of the school buildings, but we have had them on our books. We hold title, we hold insurance. So now that those bonds have been paid off, those are now with the Department of Education. So it alleviates us from some burden on the insurance side.
And was it commercial or was it residential above it?
So Norman Thomas was commercial, as was Murray Bertram.
So who now owns, what title is that portion of the building?
So those, when they were sold, the Norman Thomas was sold to the Cohen brothers, which is the owner of the building now, and Murray Bertram, I believe it was Verizon at that time. The school portion, again, was held by ECF and now is held by the Department of Education.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Wesley? Go.
So on page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth paragraph, somewhere in the middle. Let's see. Starts off accrued expenses. So it went from 4 million, let's see, to 11.2 million. And I think somewhere along the line, I also found that there was another number, but I can't find it right now, where there was an increase on a project. So I'm just kind of curious, like, can you explain the numbers?
Hi, I just gonna, while they're looking, as Jennifer mentioned, we have a construction project in Brooklyn, and as we pay the bills for the construction work, retainage is held from a certain percentage of all of the bills are held in retainage. So as construction has proceeded, the amount that we owe in retainage has increased, and we will be paying that as required as the work is complete. Thank you.
Because it's just from my standpoint, usually when there's always going to be added costs in construction, especially in new development. But I'm just curious if it's some type of evidence of maybe the subcontractor was, they weren't like purposely lower bidding and then eventually just went up to the true cost.
Yeah, no, it's not that. So we issue bonds for the school construction portion of it, and we hold those bonds, and we hold that amount. And during construction, those amounts are paid out on a timely basis once they're billed back by the developer. So in this case, we issued bonds at approximately 153 million. Is that correct? And so that amount has been held with ECF, and as bills are paid, that amount increases. The overall amount of 153 doesn't increase, but the amount that we're paying out to the contractors and subcontractors sort of resets itself with every bill that's paid.
The retainage is a standard construction policy. So in all construction, you don't want to pay the full amount up front, because then the subcontractor doesn't have incentive to make sure they finish the work. So just as a policy for all construction, they always hold a certain percentage back for retainage. So this is not specific to just to ECF.
And then at the completion of our project, we obviously will have an audit to make sure that it's kept within the amounts that we had originally allocated for the project.
What's the percentage of retainage?
I think it's around 10%.
Okay, the same thing as the city.
Correct.
You keep that money in some interest-bearing event?
Yes, it's all of the money is held in an interest. It's either treasury bills or a very secure money market.
Okay.
We can't really put it into anything else that we won't be able to access when we need it.
It's one other thing that hit me. The investment income, page 6, 2022, just a bad year in the market, huh?
Yes. That's an understatement. Yes, there was a very bad year in the market.
So for 2022, there was no actual dollars lost. Per accounting policy, the the treasury bills held have to be marked to market. So we actually always hold our treasury bills to maturity, and that year there was no losses. It's just as interest rates move, the bond prices go inverse to that. So it's just it's accounting.
Unrealized fluctuation, yeah. If the investment income is derived from any of the assets that are held in the investments, not necessarily specific to the retainage just itself. It's any of the cash that's not necessarily needed to pay immediate bills.
Okay. So this investment income, though, wouldn't be from that kind of stuff, would it?
What's that?
You wouldn't earn much by.
Oh, no. In 22, you wouldn't have earned much anyway, but I think what Cynthia's just trying to explain is it's not necessarily a cash loss, it's just an accrual adjustment.
And therefore, it's also not necessarily a profit. It's just an adjustment in.
Correct.
There's no profit there.
This is not a bad comment. This is just something that I was observing, and I was just kind of curious. It seems like your operating expenses of, page 6, same page, line total operating expenses for the bond insurance costs did not. It's like, let's see, yeah, it went down from 2021 to 2022. And I was just like, oh, that's very impressive that you reduce your expenses. So I'm just kind of curious, or am I reading it the other way around?
The bond issuance costs would just strictly be related to whatever debt was issued during that particular year. Under GASB, it's required to be expensed. If you do financial accounting in commercial sector, it's amortized over the life of the debt. This just has to do with the general costs in the market at the particular time they issue the debt. So some of that cost could have been covered by excess premiums on top of the par value of the bonds. It would just be market regulated.
Okay, I thought this was more like when you're paying the organization who's managing it or anything like that.
Oh, no, these are, yeah, so if they issue any debt they issue during the year, there's issuance costs to the underwriters and other, legal costs involved in issuing a bond. That's, yeah.
Then I take back my compliment. My apologies.
I have one minor question. On page 18, there's a net pension plus for 22 and a minus for 23. Is that all? How did that happen?
Which page, Mark? I'm sorry.
Page 16.
The pension system for ECF is under New York State ERS, which is a measurement date of March 31st year end. So again, just to get that clear, there's a difference in timing from year end here. The prior year was an asset, a pension asset, due to an overage in the pension fund, and the current year was a liability, which therefore on the accounting side resulted in that, change year over year.
I've never heard of a city pension fund overfunded.
It's the state pension funds.
State?
Yeah, they were overfunded for a couple of years. They've now since reverted.
My question. Where is it? Page 4. Sorry for making you guys go back and forth. So you noted it's going to be the first all-electric tower in New York City. I'm just going to ask what I ask anybody that comes before us that is related to construction. Is it going to be ADA compliant?
Correct. All of our school buildings and the residential tower as well, it will be ADA compliant.
Page 29. Which is going to be a silly hypothetical, just for my own curiosity. The first paragraph, just curious, what happens if the city has to sell the lease to satisfy the debt service? Just curious if that ever happens.
The city has to sell the lease. I actually don't know the answer to that question. That's not been anything that's ever come into even conversation. So I would have to go back into our statute to see if there's some sort of provision that speaks to that. But We have been extremely fortunate that we've never had to occur any sort of conversation in that regard. There have been conversations on lease extensions, and that's, you know, basically because a tenant either is refinancing or is looking for some other way to book their asset, but there's never been any conversation about selling the lease itself. The city has been firm on selling property, obviously. So we have kept all of this with the exception of those two cases that were not under my tenure. They were under the previous tenure, but we've never had that instance.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions?
The nameplate. We know who you are. Exactly. No, we feel very comfortable with the position that ECF has held over the last few years. We obviously would like to see the market change to allow us to build more projects. I think that's obviously a city, state, national hope, and we're hoping in the next few years. We have 2 bids out right now in the public, and we're hoping that those come to fruition, and we will continue to look for opportunities for development as we look, you know, in the forecast right now. But the market is not helping any of us right now, but we're hopeful.
As a former Staten Islander, it's always funny to me, there was never a project in Staten Island.
I think some of that, and we see that, we see those issues in other boroughs. It's really, you know, the crux of what we do is contingent on finding available property to keep a school active while a new construction is occurring. And those opportunities are few and far. So Staten Island they want to hold their property very tightly. So it's been very difficult to find opportunities in Staten Island. And luckily, Staten Island has a wealth of schools that are in fairly good condition, at least from the construction standpoint, maybe not from the ground, but from the construction standpoint. And because we are motivated by assisting facilities that have real deficits, Staten Island is doing okay. So
Debatable, but
again, that's way past my conversation, but I don't try.
Has your agency ever done any work on 3K or pre-K or childcare? And are you allowed to do that? I mean, is that within your purview?
So we're allowed to build any DOE facility. How it's enrolled is really a DOE question. So at our property at East 57th Street, we built 2 schools there. There's a high school, there's a lower school, there's a condominium, there's retail. There was an effort by the retail component to enter into a lease with SCA for pre-K space, which they did, but that was outside of the jurisdiction of how ECF operates. Again, we're just building the building. So I get this question a lot in terms of charters. Again, DOE works with a charter to enroll students. We just build the building. So.
And how is there some limitation or some regulation on how large a building it must be?
No, there's obviously zoning issues and things of that sort, but again, we're trying to solve a problem that's already there. Let's say in the case of our school that's going to be open in September, that was an existing high school of about 300 students. We've enlarged it, and then we're building another lower school on the same piece of property. Again, it was really because the high school there needed a larger footprint. So it's determined on need, not, there's high schools that are, 3,000 kids. And then there's schools that are 100 kids. So it really depends on the need.
And if the DOE asked you to begin to focus on possibilities for pre-K and 3K, you guys would be able to do that?
That's a very loaded question.
Assuming you can find something, obviously, that there's some property that meets the criteria.
Again, the focus is really not on the enrollment. It's really on the building need. And there's few and far between standalone pre-Ks. Most of them are attached to another school. So we would work with the DOE if there was an issue of just a pre-K. Yes, we could do it. There's no restrictions on us being able to do it. But again, I think the DOE may want it for other purposes somewhere down the line. So,
and one last question: if the DOE was involved in childcare, public childcare, you could then also build buildings or work on properties for childcare. That would include childcare. If the DOE was, if it was part of the DOE's,
you're talking about
work.
Daycare, things of that sort. As long as the DOE is asking for a facility, we can build it. It's the easiest way to answer it.
Are there any other questions? Since the management letter has nothing, thanks for coming this morning.
Thank you. Good to see you. I love your tie, Mark.
You know what? I woke up this morning.
I'm still saying it still looks good, so.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself and if anybody's on Zoom for the purpose of getting everybody into the minutes?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ewan Wang. I am the Director of Accounting Operations at the SCA. I just wanted to mention, usually Marianne is with us today. She sent her apologies. Unfortunately, she is retiring from the SCA, and tomorrow is her last day with us, so she's unable to make it today. In her place, I have Stephen Maroney, Senior Director from the SCA to my left, and he will be giving the opening remarks for the SCA.
Thanks. I go back with Marianne to the start of SCA.
Good morning. Yes, so my name is Steve Maroney. I'm Senior Director of Finance at the SCA. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the SCA. So the SCA formed in 1988, a public benefit corporation, in charge of capital construction for the schools of the city of New York. So we build new schools and we rehabilitate existing schools. We upgrade them, the windows, roofs, everything you could imagine. So a summary of the operations for FY23. It was the fourth year of our 5-year plan. So we're guided by a 5-year plan. So it's the fourth year of our 5-year plan. This 5-year plan is currently valued at $19 billion. In FY23, we obligated or committed $4.7 billion. In FY23, we awarded construction contracts for 19 new schools valued at $718 million. We also awarded construction contracts for 361 CIP, capital improvement projects, totaling $2.24 billion. In this past September, in September 2023, SCA opened 25 new schools, adding 6,532 new seats to the system. Currently, we have 48 capacity projects in construction and 821 CIP projects in construction. This upcoming September 24, we are on track to open 24 new schools, which will add 11,000 new seats to the system. Current day, our 5-year plan will be ending in June 30th of this year, and we will be embarking on our next 5-year plan. That will begin July 1st, currently valued at approximately $17 billion, slightly lower than this current 5-year plan, but still a significant amount. I know that electrification came up earlier with the buses, so that's also going to be a big focus of the SCA in the next plan, where we will be trying to beginning the process of removing the boilers that are using natural gas or oil, and we will be electrifying the schools, putting the heat pumps on the roofs, and trying to electrify everything. That also includes upgrading the science labs and any other part of the school which is also using gas or oil for fuel. So that's basically an overview of everything for today. We'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Quick question, I guess. ECF was just here. So if you had a school that you were renovating or expanding, if all the other schools except for their 18 schools, SCA handles.
That's correct, yes.
If there was an expansion or something to take place within their schools, they handle the financing and the expenditures and all the administrative tasks of that.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the financial statements? Wes?
Hello. As stated before, and I always will ask for any organization that comes before us, our agency, about construction. What are your thoughts on ADA compliancy?
Part of our design process is that we have to obviously abide by New York City building code, and ADA compliance is a large piece of that, and all our projects consider ADA compliance.
You could go above it, you know.
Excuse me?
You could go above the law too, you know.
Yes, okay, note taken.
Larian, did you have a question?
I'm just, first of all, I'm glad to finally see you, Steve, in
Yes.
person.
Thank
We've
you.
had
Nice
many
to see you again.
conversations, and I'm sort of sad. I mean, I'm sad, Marianne is retiring, but, we all deserve it. And I did just want to say, it's been my experience that SCA has done a marvelous job with the schools. And, I think back to what it looked like in 2000 and 2005, and you began to notice that the schools looked better. So I don't have any questions. I'm not going to torture you. I just want to say you guys seem to do a good job.
Thank you. We appreciate that comment.
Are there any other questions regarding the financials? There is a management letter with several comments. Do you want to discuss those or make any comments about them?
So we did have a couple, and most of them were IT related. and it's currently being addressed and on target to do so based on the target dates over there. So I didn't know if you want me to cover specifically or go into anyone in particular on the management comment.
If you could, never mind.
Okay.
I'm just going to reiterate what he said for the remote audience. They are going to walk through it.
Thank you. And I'm gonna have Phil chime in on some of them if there is any. Sorry. So the first one we had was mainly related to the IT policies and procedures. I know we had a couple that were outdated dating back to maybe 2007. And they are currently being worked on. Our IT and policies group unit at the SCA are working closely together, and this is on target to be addressed by June of this year. So basically, they're being looked through right now. So I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions in particular for that one.
This may be a follow-up question. Are you going to focus on matters of labor in IT, meaning that, terminations and so off and cutting off access to systems? Because I'm looking at the year and I know that case law has slightly changed around that time frame.
So there is one, we're looking at user access as part of it, and it is on one of the management comment letters. We have been every year reviewing access to our application systems, and unfortunately, one year we got a little behind, and Mayor Hoffman McCann had noticed that and put it in our management comment letter, but we are focusing on it, yes.
The focus shouldn't take that long to decide some of what these things do. And if you have one break-in, you'll regret not having imposed these policies rather more rapidly than you are. I mean, I've seen people who change the policy overnight when there's one person who took advantage of it. And suddenly the access codes get changed and the length of time get changed. And I urge you not to wait till that happens.
Agreed and noted.
The first comment, I guess, cybersecurity. Do you work with the city cybersecurity task force, I think?
So we actually work with them in terms of penetration testing. In some ways, we do hire our own third-party vendor also to do the penetration testing. And I think the last one we did was, I'm trying to remember, back in 22. And it had some results that we're working through and to strengthen our own application systems internally.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, was that a yes, that you work with Cyber Command, or are you?
Not directly.
Okay.
I mean, we speak with them to get guidance or things of that. We have our own network and system. We don't really use the city's system.
Thank you.
So I'll move on to the next comment, observation, which pertains to our business continuity planning, as well as what we just talked about on the penetration testing. And I think the key focus here, the takeaway from the management comment, was to incorporate any of the findings from the testing to our business continuity planning and also address any of the high-risk findings. So our IT group has focused, has addressed all the high-risk findings and also all the other medium to low-risk findings as of current. And then from a business continuity planning, it has been incorporated and it's currently reviewed under our president right now. We'll move on to observation 3 if there's no further questions on observation 2. Sorry, this one. Okay. So the third one relates to, I think someone mentioned user access, and that's the one relating to our applications on the Primavera system and also our Oracle. So our Oracle has been addressed. We've done a review of the user access, and on the Primavera, that's on target as well. And the last management comment letter has to do with our service organizations. And I think in this one, Mayor Hoffman-McCann was focusing on really just taking a look at all the service organizations we use at the SCA and kind of rate them as to the risk and the impact to the SCA and the focus on their service organization control reports. So internally, we have started a meeting with that. Our internal audit unit is involved in this and drafting a process for us and also doing the risk assessment and along with IT. And eventually, all the business units will be involved because of their oversight of the service organizations.
People can come and complain. A whistleblower line.
Yeah, they have a whistleblower line, but this relates to service organizations that they contract with outside to either run systems or processes. Could be a payroll provider, could be a management system of their fixed assets or their construction services, where an auditor such as myself, I don't do that type of work, comes in and issues a report on their controls of the service organization. And we recommended just that the SCA documents and reviews the service auditor's report because they could be working with a vendor that's just not complying with their own controls or doesn't have strong controls in place.
Oh, I understand that. How many, how often does somebody complain on that hotline? And to whom does it go? To whom does the complaint go?
Well, in regards to the whistleblower, it actually goes to the human resources. As of how many, I am not certain. We can take that as a takeaway and get back to you guys on those.
I ask because I've had an experience where somebody came in and made all kinds of suggestions about controls, and there were a lot of whistleblowing about being unhappy with that sort of thing.
If you get back, please get back to Katrina Stauffer, the secretary, and she'll get distributed to all the committee members.
Will do.
I have a question about the whistleblowing. You said HR, correct? How big is your
yes.
How big is your organization? Because typically for big or medium-sized organizations, it's usually divided. Like there's HR and there's compliance for whistleblowing. So I'm just kind of curious.
We have approximately 920 employees as far as the size of us. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure of the answer to that question.
It shall be a follow-up. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the management letter? Having none, thanks for coming this morning, and please wish Marianne my best. Thanks.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Having no other business before us, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I so move. I so move.
We are adjourned.
Michaela, you can